Someone lies to you and you get angry and you react. You say things, you argue, you yell. Somebody creates a situation for you that's uncomfortable at work or anywhere else. You get angry, you react, you go into high gear. You try to prove yourself to everyone. That is reaction, not response. Welcome to episode 39 of the Positivity Experience, Reaction versus Response. Check it out. Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 39 of the Positivity Experience. I am your host, Lori, and I cannot begin to express the amount of gratitude, I don't even know what an amount is, but the amount of gratitude in which I have for so many of you who are tuning in every single week all over the world. I appreciate you guys so much. I don't think you realize exactly how important you guys all mean to me. Every person listening to this right now and sharing the podcast, and it just means a whole lot. So I just wanted to first and foremost give you so much gratitude and remind you to make sure that you're paying that gratitude forward for other people, but you're doing it so more for yourself, but then you're able to share that love with other people. And then that's how we spread joy. You can see how we can spread negativity so quickly. It can be the same for positivity. It just doesn't always seem to be the normal process, which brings me to today's podcast that you heard in the beginning of the trailer. Oh boy. So it's been a very long week. But here's the deal. How you view things and what you take from them really does fall in your lap. Like it is your responsibility. And as you heard in the beginning trailer, when I said if somebody lies to you or if somebody does something wrong to you at work or anywhere else, sometimes you're going to have that not fight or flight, but kind of that fight mode, like boxing, like I'm ready to go. Like, why would you say that? And you go from 0 to 60 in like 100 miles per hour, right? And that's not going to serve your best and highest good. And I wanted to share with you a little story that happened this week. You're going to be like, God, didn't she just do a podcast like this? Yes, but for some odd reason, this still seems to be an issue in the world in which we live in. So for those of my lovely friends overseas, I do know that you guys struggle with what I'm getting ready to talk to you guys about as well. So this is relevant to everybody everywhere. So this weekend was not prom. I keep saying prom, homecoming weekend for our local high school and many high schools around the country. And so, they have a spirit week. Well, Monday and Tuesday, Santa was at home with strep. So Wednesday was United States Day. And this honestly was super problematic, I think. And it was a poor choice in the decision. I personally believe in the climate of the way that the United States is right now here. It's probably not a really great idea to have a U.S. Day. I mean, the concept behind it of unity, I think in some other dimension would probably be good, like it was after 9/11, because that really, it was just totally different though. A 9/11 situation was not good, not recommended, but it was a whole different type of a U.S. Day. That really was a lot of pulling together. So not a good idea. So it was done. And this was on Wednesday. And it became a former president day. And for other people who were not in support of that, who might have been, or who were, not might have been, of the LGBTQ community, just had their flags, flag shirts, flag different things, just kind of, hey, you rep you, I rep me, I do you, you do me, right? I mean, I do me, right? And it turned out to be problematic. In like the biggest of ways, because it became very violent. From word on the streets is that people were suspended, and not violent like you're thinking as far as punching people in the face, but violent in words. And there was rumored to have been, which I'm going to tell you rumored because I didn't hear it from my own ears, but it was rumored to have been said, hey, if you're gay, you got to expect to be bullied. Okay, so heard this, wasn't happy about it. Had my clients throughout the week, because you guys know I have my clients, and Thursday was Powder Puff Game. So, I was like, okay, let me jot this down. I'll make some calls, make sure that things can get taken care of. I do have a lot of connections in certain areas to try to make changes, right? Like, let's make changes. Let's not react. So you have a couple different choices, right? You can react and go off go off your rocker. Or you can take a minute to process it so you can respond. People hear you in response. They do not hear you in reaction, or they'll hear you in reaction. They're not going to listen to you. Keep arguing, keep yelling, keep trying to prove your point all day long. It's not going to be as effective. Okay. So Thursday night was powder puff game, and my daughter went, and she went with a friend, or she was meeting a friend. And so she met up with another friend who happens to be maybe a little bit more popular or considered popular. And while she was sitting there, there were boys, not girls, boys that were pretty much harassing her, calling her the F slur, Faggot. So calling her the F slur, and various things. And one was like kicking her, not hard, but kicking her. This became problematic. You guys have heard my past podcasts, and you know that she also struggles with depression and SH, which is self-harm, and so many other things, and suicidal ideations. And luckily, from when she was away for that week, I have most of the medicines put away, not like the melatonin and vitamins, stuff like that. So she did take a half a bottle of melatonin, and the melatonin, I called the doctor. She's fine. It was fine. I was actually quite proud of her because she processed her emotions faster than she ever has before. Like, still not a good process because it could have been something else, and then it wouldn't have been so benign, right? So we talked, we worked through it. She laid in bed with me. We had a communication, and it's very difficult because, and you've heard her story, and it's she hasn't always had the best experience with guys since she was a kid. Just she hasn't. And so this is yet another thing that creates this distrust, right? This is a chronic thing. This has been this way pretty much all of her life. And now this is just going into the high school, and it's a whole other thing. So did that make us angry? Yes. My husband was angry. I was angry. My son was angry. Everybody was angry, right? And you have to sit with it. You don't fight the anger, but you don't react. Like, you don't go off the deep end. You don't get in your car. You don't go to somebody's house. You don't go banging on their door. Like, no. Okay. So you got to process it. So what you have to do is you learn the art of responding versus reacting. Initially, especially, and you guys know my backstory. If you don't, you could go back into a couple of these podcasts, but, it was tough, right? Because my dad was always a yeller, and a lot of people in the family were yellers. And if you wanted to be heard, you always had to yell, but then nobody listened. And so it becomes problematic because your go-to is, I'm going to talk louder, which means I'm right, which is bullshit. Just because you talk louder doesn't mean you're right. Just because you argue doesn't mean you're right. And just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean you're right. Okay. For everybody else. And so, I moved some clients around Friday, moved some clients around, 5 or 6 clients around, so I could, start to say, what can I do? Because I have a couple choices. I could either sit here, be angry, and just complain about it, or what are some things that I can do to execute this to show people that I'm not going to just overreact. However, be stern enough to know that there's going to be a repercussion, or to bring the education about repercussions. So I called some of my friends who are kind of high up in the legal system. And so we are going to try to potentially get an assembly together. Not like, hey guys, let's all take a bond. No, more like, hey, you know what? This is what happens. If somebody commits suicide because you bully them, you can get murder charges on you. Literally. And see, I don't think people realize, people are like, oh, okay, I'll get a little suspended. It's fine. But you know what? People of all ages need to know this. Okay. This goes for social media. This goes for schools. This goes for workplace. This goes for walking down the street. This goes for the grocery store. And remember, hurt people hurt people. Okay. So ignorance is always going to run rampant. Like, I'm not delusioned to think that all of a sudden everybody's going to have a kumbaya moment. But there will be something put in place that reminds everybody and is followed up on of, okay, if you continue to do this, there's a couple things. That's a hate crime. That's harassment. That's assault. I mean, the list is kind of endless, right? And so the structure of that makes me want to do this specific podcast, because it wasn't really on the roster to do react versus respond. It was, but not today, and not with this story behind it. So the reason I did is because I have so many people who go, how do you keep it together without coming unhinged? You went through it with your son. You've gone through it several times with your daughter, actually several times with your son. Like, how do you not like come unglued? Well, because coming unglued will never get me heard. If you keep overreacting to everything, and I say overreacting, right? And you'd get, well, you're not really overreacting. You are, because you are overreacting, not overreacting to dismantle the importance of the situation, but you overreact without thinking of your response. In turn, it makes you erratic. Let me give you an example. And I've done this with, I see this a lot of times with some of my clients as well. You are in a relationship and I don't know, you keep quote unquote nagging or talking to somebody and, hey, this is wrong and this is this, and you're snapping and all of that stuff. And then this person goes and tells their friends, oh man, they're crazy. Like, oh my God, all they do is yell at me. All they do is nag. And you think, if you would just do what I want you to do, I wouldn't nag you, right? So in turn, getting you on this weird spin wheel. Okay. The reality is, if you come at somebody sideways, or if you are bullying, or if you are feeling as though you're entitled or better than, you then look like the problem. Okay. So this is where narcissists and manipulators are golden. And they often, haven't you ever said to yourself, how do these quote unquote, because I don't think people are bad. I think there's traits and things that they're going through. And I think that's just me because of the work that I do, but people aren't necessarily bad. They do bad things. They have bad traits, but and then you go back to that nature versus nurture that I was talking to you guys about before. So, there's a couple things so I guess I look at things differently, but the problem is when you're like, God, how do these people, like in a divorce situation, how does this person who quote unquote is bad, how did they win? Well, they won because they're a narcissist, so they know how to put on the face. We've had this talk. A narcissist can be an absolute nightmare at the house, manipulative, controlling, violent, okay? But then walk out the door and everybody around them loves them. They are like, oh my God, yeah, oh, they are so sweet. Meanwhile, you're like, what? Right? And so the reality is this. So if a narcissist has now painted you out, and I'm just using this as an example, just because people paint you out to be bad does not make them narcissists. So do not misconstrue that everybody who's trying to make you look bad is a narcissist. That is not a true statement. Okay. So, but think of it this way. So now they've told everybody in the neighborhood how you keep coming unglued. Meanwhile, they don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And then you come out, and if you're reacting, not responding, then you are feeding into what they're saying, right? Now, that goes across the board. Social media. And I mean, you guys already know how I feel about Facebook. I post there just to keep a presence there, but it is not my jam. And it's not because everybody's complaining with no action. Okay. When you are in complaining with no action, you will always have a reaction. Okay. So think of it this way. Okay. With everything that just went on, I'm going to have an action to at least put things into place to let everybody know these are some consequences that can happen. This is why, and we will instill them. Okay. That is an action based on a situation that was not a positive situation. A reaction, right, would have been a whole different situation. And you can never take action if you are in a complaint mode. I can't do this. I don't understand. Why this? Why that? Can't is not a thing. Right this moment, I cannot fly a plane. That is a very true statement. However, it's not that I can't fly a plane. I don't know how. I don't have the tools. I don't have the education to fly a plane. I can get the education to fly a plane, right? So this goes all the way across the board. So if you're like, well, God, I don't know. I've just always been so short-tempered and I'm always combative. Okay, cool. So now you have two choices. By saying this is how you are and this is how you've always been, you're essentially saying, this is just how I am. This is just how I am. I don't really know how to change, so I'm not going to. Do you want to? Right? And that goes into action versus reaction versus response. Because a response, and this is where boundaries will come into play. So let's say you feel as though somebody's overstepping your boundaries, or attempting to, because they can't really overstep a boundary in what you believe in. You can either say, God, what is wrong with you? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, don't you understand? So you can do that because your frustration's building up. See, when you learn the art of response, you won't have to react as much because you're going to have a way of emotional regulation and of how to handle it based upon whatever the situation is, right? So instead of that, you're able to process it. So haven't you ever heard somebody say you're not filtered? Which, I mean, for the most part, I'm not, but I am cognizant. If I'm good with my unfiltered, I promise you it's been filtered enough that I'm fine with it being out there, right? Like in my brain. So think of it as like what comes into your brain. Then think of like a pause point, like, do I want, now listen, I understand in a perfect world, this would be great. You're like, yeah, if somebody pushes me off the road or does something, I'm going to have a reaction. Sometimes you're going to need to have the reaction, but then you don't continue the reaction. You pause with it to have the response, right? And so allowing yourself to get comfortable in the discomfort without the reaction, which by the way, will take time. I mean, you guys know I have clients all over the world. And yet I still have to do this every single day. This week was, yet again, I was like, oh, motherfucker, we got to do this all over again. It's a thing. Was I angry? I was angry. I took a minute. I processed it. And I said, okay, I can either go off the deep end like a lunatic, or I can allow myself the pause of response and look to see what kind of action I can do versus complaining. Because if I'm complaining about something with no idea of a change or something to implement, then it's just going to make me miserable and everybody around me. Right? So you've got to think of it from the perspective of immediately you think if you're reacting and you're 0 to 60 and you are addressing the situation right away and you're getting angry and you're like, no way somebody's going to get over on you, you are actually feeding into the narrative in which they have in their mind. Right? So again, you guys know. And listen, I'm going to tell you, like, how do I process it? So in the moment, I always go into business mode. I don't necessarily go in mom mode. I go in business mode, right? Because it's my job. So I sit with it. Okay, how do I want to process it? I go through the week. Well, today, I'm actually recording this on a Sunday. But so today I did my little TikTok chat that I always do on Sundays. And then I was like, okay, I have a bunch of things I got to do. I have some more chapters to write in the book. I was exhausted from the week mentally because there is a level of control, quote unquote control. Now it is kind of like a muscle memory for me, but there's a level of control not to allow the angered feelings to become reactive, right? So it's almost like you're holding back the horse's reins, right? So you will get exhausted, right? The art of response versus reaction is exhausting, right? Even if you practice it every day. So today, I watched 2 hours of Bachelor in Paradise. I watched some football, 2 hours of Bachelor in Paradise. Going to watch a little TV. I'm doing my podcast, doing my editing. Might vacuum, might not. Might take a shower, might not. And I don't care, right? Because you got to give your body the time to disconnect from everything, to process the emotion, right? Because that, right, the reactive emotion, if not going into reactive, to pause it, to recycle it as a response, will be taxing. Just know that it will. Don't care how often you do it, it will be exhausting. So giving yourself the space to do a nothing day or to be like, yeah, I got a lot to do, but you know what? My mental health is going to be the best. Because the last thing I want to do is, like, I'm still going to be addressing this throughout the week, but I'm not going to take that same response into this week coming up with me. So you have to be able to dump it, which means doing something mindless, doing something that's like unimportant, doing something that I don't care what you have to do. You got to be able to have that so you can sort of empty your cup out so you can fill it up for the next time. And there will be frequent times throughout the week. You have to check yourself on your reaction, because again, it's never that you're wrong for wanting to react because you feel some kind of way or you feel attacked or whatever the case may be. However, again, you will not get the sustainable results, because have you ever been in a situation or been on the receiving end of a situation? Let's say that. Have you ever been in the receiving end of the situation where, oh my God, every time you say something to somebody, it's an argument, or you're not doing this right, or it's constantly combative. You're like, oh my God, this is so exhausting. You're not really listening to the person. Half the time you don't even want to be around them because you're like, oh my God, all they do is go off the deep end. They're in constant reaction mode. They're constantly in negative. Reaction moded people are always inherently mostly negative people. Now, I'm not saying these random things that happen. I told you will have reactive days just because that's life, right? Just not staying in them. And so allowing yourself to realize, what would it be like, right? And this is going to be a little soul searching inside of you. Like, this is going to be some reality about yourself, because I would be remiss if we keep blaming everybody else, right? Because, oh, this person, no. We got to check ourselves, right? We got to stay in our lane. So ask yourself one day, like in a week or in a day, try to be mindful of always be mindful of your verbiage with yourself, but be mindful of your delivery, and try to be aware if you're responding or reacting, right? And then what I want you to do is I want you to say, okay, in my reactions, if I was on the other end, not you as you, but if you were in the other end of that and somebody was saying that and reacting that way, how would you feel about that? Because there's a really good chance you'd shut down. There's a really good chance you'd be like, oh my God, I can't with this person. It's going to be the same thing. So a person is more inclined, or a situation to be changed is going to be more inclined. I'm not asking you not to be passionate, right? I'm not asking you to say, hey, so, be passionate, but be careful of the reactions, because again, the moment you prove somebody right, even if you are 1000% right, even if somebody's talking mad smack and you're angry and you're irritated, allow that feeling, but your delivery is going to be your key, right? This is with your kids, with your parents. If you are constant in attack mode or constant in react mode, you're going to get shut down. There's going to be problems in relationships, problems with work, problems with yourself, anger with self. So this is a full-on regulation, right? And it's hard because people don't necessarily have emotional regulation normally. I mean, you do to some level, but this is a skill. Sorry, I'm burping and I have no idea why. This is a skill in which you've got to work on. Yes, the therapy will help. Life coaching will help. Mindfulness will 1000% help. So the reaction and response becomes easier when you implement all these other things. Because remember, anything I share with you on here, the YouTube, good God, I sound like I'm 100, YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, anything I share with you there is a tool. There is no one way perfect solution, right? So in order to, like, let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to respond to everything and not react, but you're not dealing with your traumas and you're not dealing with certain things and you're not doing your soul searching and you're not cutting yourself off from negative energy and you're not being, okay, then that's only going to be effective for so long. So everything that I talk to you guys about, it's tools, right? Essentially, you have a empty or a broken toolbox, right? With no tools in it, or rusted tools and tools that you kind of jankily make work. So it's about giving you the new tools, but then it's up to you to implement them. So if you say things like, oh my God, that's way too hard. Well, then you are going to be constant in reactive mode. And then you're going to be like, why does nobody listen to me? And it's going to be a problematic thing. And that's going to be a you issue, right? It's not going to be a them issue, because as mentioned, you cannot, right? A situation cannot, including the situation I just told you about, does not have power over how I feel. I attach a feeling, or you attach a feeling to the situation. If you're like, well, I attached anger. Okay, well, anger isn't going to be effective. You're allowed the feeling and you're allowed to process those emotions. But when it becomes reactive versus responsive, it is going to be extremely problematic in every relationship you have, but most importantly, the one with yourself. So if you are in a chronic place of defensiveness, chronic place of they better see my side, chronic place of I need to defend myself, chronic place of I need to walk around fixing people, then absolutely you will stay in a reactive state. It's tough, right? Because you're like, oh my God, but what do I do? You allow it to process. I just told you I was angry, right? I was angry, but I sat with it. I didn't respond with it. I allowed myself to have these sort of intrusive thoughts and angered thoughts and the feelings and the physical feelings. Allow myself to sit with them. Allow myself to vent on them, but not to the world, not to Facebook, not to, you know what I mean? To vent to them, and then allow myself to go, okay, now, is there anything I can do about this? And in this case, yes, there is. I can start to like really try to make some changes, and hopefully it can affect many people, not just my own household. But let's say it isn't something that I could do. Let's say it was some random thing that I just literally couldn't fix or I couldn't help, right? Then that's an acceptance piece that I would have to get to. Not in this case, but I'm saying across the board. There are going to be some things you have zero control over. And if you're holding on to it and you're in constant reactive mode with a situation that you have zero capability of changing, again, that's a you issue, because that goes into that control mechanism that we've talked about. Control is fear, fear is control, right? It's this weird cycle that kind of happens. Control feeds fear, fear feeds control, lack thereof becomes problems. Then you become reactive. Then your anxiety kicks. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's like you're standing at the top of a hill with a little teeny tiny snowball and you push it and it just picks up traction. It's picking up the rocks. It's picking up the sticks. It's picking up everything. And then it gets to the bottom and it's a boulder. And what happens to the boulder when it or the not boulder, you know what I'm saying? Like a great big snowball. And, when it gets to the bottom, if it hits a tree, it's going to break apart. That's all that haste and anger and hostility. And let me be the first one to tell you, if you're walking around angry, you will not, and this is a fact, you will not progress in a forward direction. You will not get the things that you're trying to manifest. You will not build healthy relationships. You will build codependent relationships on either party, and sometimes both. You will build dictatorial relationships where you feel the need to go through somebody's stuff. You guys already know I do not advocate for going through somebody's phone. Never have, never will. Okay. And their personals, right? I think with kids, it can become a little different, right? Because I'm talking about in relationships, because sometimes you are going to have to, if something becomes like a little bit of a trigger, and if it comes to the safety of a person, that's a little bit of a different situation. I'm talking about a relationship, like, is this person talking to this person? I just don't advocate for that, right? And when you're working in those spaces and when you're working in those areas, because to use that for an example, people aren't items. You don't own people, right? I don't care if you're married or not. You don't own the person. And I promise you this, go through their socials all day long. Nothing's stopping them from getting a burner phone. Nothing's stopping them from leaving their little GPS phone in their car and going to do their thing. Nothing. And if you constantly feel like you need to own a partner, that is a problem. That is where you must make an appointment with me or somebody ASAP, right? Because it's a deeper issue than just the person. And it can be fixed. You don't have to walk around feeling like somebody's always out to get you. I promise. Right? And so that's kind of what I want to leave you with this week, right? Like, as we start to wrap up this week's podcast, is really pay attention to yourself. Really pay attention to your reactions. Are you reactive with the line at Dunkin' Donuts? Are you reactive with the traffic? Are you reactive, and not just outwardly reactive? Are you reactive internally? Feel the feelings, be irritated if needed, but learn the art of not needing to control that and hold on to that, right? Because you will be triggered. Like, I mean, welcome to the world. Welcome to Monday. Welcome to Sunday. It doesn't matter. You will be, right? But it's how you respond to it. Because for so long, I lived in a reactive state, right? With all the trauma and growing up as a kid and always feeling like I needed to wake up, like I was going to take on the day. I was going to conquer the day, but not, I can conquer today. Like, no, I'm going to make sure that nobody screws me over today. Oh my God, that's the most exhausting way to live and extremely isolating, you know? And yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate. You know, you would think that as we get more quote unquote intelligent, that racism and homophobia and equal rights wouldn't be so problematic, but yet here we are, right? Again, if you can't do something about it, you accept it. But if you can do something about it, you have two choices. You can either complain about it, do nothing, stay reactive, put plans in place to become responsive and to create some form of change. You're not going to change the world. You can try, but if you change one person, just one, mostly yourself, right? If you can change one person, and change, I want to be careful when I use that word too. Let's say enhance, better align that person or yourself, most importantly yourself. That's all that you need to do, right? Because if more people start taking accountability of their own actions and accept, right? Again, you're not going to make it happen. It'd be great. Everybody takes accountability. We'd all have a perfect life. The reality is not going to happen. So if you're waiting on somebody to take accountability, that may not ever happen either. And so it's working on that. So your homework this week, until I talk to you next week, your homework is really check yourself. Check how much you're responding and how much you're acting. Are you constantly in, I need to defend myself? Are you constantly in, I need to make sure people always see my side of the story? People don't need to know your side of the story, and you don't need to know theirs, right? You just don't. Not in every situation. I'm not saying ever. I'm saying it really is situational. But if you're going into it in a reactive tone, you will always, always remain reactive, negative, and very much lonely. Check it out.